Captain Darren Cole wasn't just any pilot. To passengers, he was the voice of calm, that reassuring tone that told you everything was going to be fine, even when turbulence hit. Tall, clean-cut, and always in uniform 15 minutes early, he was known for one thing: control. Control over the aircraft, control over his emotions, control over every tiny detail of his life. At least, that's how it used to be. That morning, though, everything went wrong. The alarm didn't ring, the coffee machine jammed, his uniform shirt wasn't ironed, and when he finally glanced at the clock, 5:14 a.m., his heart dropped. His flight was scheduled for 7 a.m., sharp, from his apartment in Brooklyn to JFK. That meant traffic, security checks, pre-flight briefings, and no time for mistakes. Darren rushed to the kitchen. He cracked 2 eggs into a pan, whisked them quickly, and sprinkled pepper, the same way his mother used to when she said, "Start your day with something warm, baby, it keeps you calm." It was something he always did before a big flight, a small ritual that reminded him of home. As he cooked, his phone buzzed with a message from his co-pilot, Emily Park, reminding him not to forget the flight logs. He nodded to himself. Got it. He turned down the flame, dropped the omelet onto a plate, took one bite, grabbed his cap, and sprinted out the door. The stove still on. He didn't notice the faint hiss of the gas behind him. The flight from New York to London was smooth. The Atlantic stretched endlessly below them, a sheet of silver clouds glowing under the morning sun. Emily was chatting about her daughter's first school recital. Darren smiled, listening half-heartedly. He was calm, professional, composed, exactly as everyone expected him to be, until it hit him. The sound of the burner clicking, the blue flame licking the bottom of the pan, the unfinished breakfast on the counter. No way did I turn the stove off. His hand froze mid-air, the controls blurred in front of him. His chest tightened like a fist. His breathing grew shallow. Emily noticed immediately. "Captain, you okay?" He tried to brush it off. Yeah, I'm fine." But his eyes told another story. He whispered, "Emily, I think I left my stove on." She blinked. "Your stove?" "Yeah, I was cooking this morning. I was late. I rushed out." He pressed his fingers against his temple. "I didn't turn it off. Emily, my apartment, my neighbors, if that flame's still on, the whole building." For a man who spent years facing emergency lights and turbulence without blinking, this was different. This wasn't a cockpit problem. It was home. It was personal. Emily, calm but alert, leaned forward. "Okay, let's think. You said you live in Brooklyn, right? We can contact ADC, maybe they can reach someone." But Darren shook his head, panic rising. "We're over the Atlantic, Emily. What can they even do?" That's when Naomi, the head flight attendant, knocked on the cockpit door. "Captain, everything okay? You look pale." Emily hesitated, then explained. Naomi's expression softened. She'd known Darren for 7 years. He was the kind of pilot who never lost his cool. Seeing him like this, it wasn't something she could ignore. Without hesitation, she said, "I'll handle it." Naomi wasn't just a flight attendant. She was the kind of woman who could calm a screaming infant, comfort a nervous passenger, and still smile through a 12-hour flight. But now, she had to find a way to help her captain. From 36,000 feet in the air, she quickly reached out to the airline's ground operations team via the onboard comms. "This is Flight 221 to JFK Control. We have a crew emergency, non-medical. Need immediate assistance contacting local emergency services in Brooklyn." The response came seconds later. "Copy that, Flight 221. What's the situation?" Naomi explained everything. Darren's address, the suspected gas leak, the urgency. Then, as she waited, she did something unexpected. She pulled out the crew roster, scanned it, and found Darren's emergency contact. A neighbor, Mr. Patel, an elderly man living in the apartment next door. She called the airline's ground desk and asked them to reach him directly. Tell him to check on the captain's apartment, but not to go inside. Just call the fire department. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, minutes stretched like hours. Darren sat frozen, staring at the flight instruments but seeing only his kitchen. He imagined smoke filling the air, the smell of burning gas, the neighbors he'd greeted every morning with a polite nod. Mrs. Rodriguez, the retired teacher from 3B, the little girl from down the hall who always waved when he left for work. His stomach churned. "God, what have I done?" Emily stayed composed, guiding him gently. "We've done what we can, Captain. Naomi's handling it. Breathe. You're not alone." Those words, "you're not alone," hit deeper than she knew. 10 minutes later, Naomi reappeared in the cockpit. Her face was glowing, soft relief in her smile. They got it, she said. Your neighbor smelled the gas. He called the fire department. They shut it off in time. No damage. Everyone's safe. Darren's shoulders dropped. His eyes closed. For the first time that day, he let out a trembling breath, part laughter, part tears. He whispered, thank you so much." Emily smiled. "Looks like your crew saved more than just the passengers today." As they continued the flight, Darren couldn't stop replaying it in his mind. The panic, the helplessness, and the incredible way his crew stepped up without hesitation. He'd always seen himself as the protector, the one keeping everyone safe, but today, they protected him. By the time the plane landed in London, passengers clapped for a smooth flight, never knowing that their captain had just experienced one of the most human moments of his life. The sun was just breaking through the clouds as Flight 221 touched down at Heathrow. To most people on that plane, it was just another smooth transatlantic flight, but to Captain Darren Cole, it felt like the longest journey of his life, and one he'd never forget. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, he removed his headset and sat back. He could still hear Naomi's calm voice in his mind. "They got it. You're home safe." Those words had carried him through the rest of the flight. When the seatbelt sign went off, Darren made his usual announcement, steady, professional, but there was something softer in his tone this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London Heathrow. Thank you for flying with us today. On behalf of myself and the entire crew, we wish you a safe and pleasant stay." He clicked off the intercom and just sat there for a second, silent. Emily turned to him with a faint smile. "You did great, Captain. Not just with the flight, with everything." He managed a small laugh. "Couldn't have done it without you, or Naomi." The crew gathered for their post-flight debrief. The usual chatter filled the room, coffee cups clinking, tired laughter echoing, luggage wheels rolling across the floor. Darren walked over to Naomi, who was neatly folding her service apron. She looked up, noticing how unusually quiet he was. "Hey, Captain," she said softly. "You holding up okay?" He nodded, hesitating before replying. "Naomi, I don't even know how to thank you. You went above and beyond back there." Naomi smiled. "It's what we do, sir. We look out for each other." "No," Darren said, shaking his head. "You didn't have to. You could have just reported it and moved on. But you took charge. You called my neighbor, the fire department. You saved my home. My life could have changed completely today if you hadn't acted." Naomi's expression softened. "You've been the one keeping hundreds of lives safe for years, Captain." It was her turn to return the favor. There was a pause, one of those quiet, heavy moments that didn't need words. Then Naomi chuckled lightly. "Besides, you owe me coffee for that. Real coffee, not the kind we serve on flights." That made him laugh, genuinely, this time. Deal. The next morning, after checking into their crew hotel, Darren found himself thinking about Naomi's words. He couldn't remember the last time someone had stepped up for him like that. He'd always been the helper, the fixer, the steady hand everyone leaned on. But now, sitting in his hotel room staring out at the London skyline, he realized how rare it was to meet people who helped without expecting anything back. So, he sent a message. "You still up for that coffee you mentioned?" She replied, "Only if you're buying, Captain." He said, "I think that's the least I can do." Naomi arrived first, out of uniform this time, her curly hair loose, wearing a simple blue blouse. When Darren walked in, she almost didn't recognize him without his pilot cap. "You clean up well," she joked as he approached. He smiled. "And you don't look like someone who just managed a 7-hour flight with 200 passengers." They sat down, the kind of quiet comfort between them that comes from having already shared something intense. Over coffee, Darren finally opened up. "You know, when I realized I'd left that stove on, I froze. I've flown through engine failures, lightning storms, near-miss turbulence, but that moment, I couldn't breathe." It wasn't just about the fire, it was about how easily everything can fall apart. Naomi listened intently. "Sometimes it's not the big emergencies that break us, it's the small human moments we can't control." He nodded slowly, eyes distant. "Exactly. I've built my whole life around control, around not making mistakes. But that morning, it reminded me I'm still human." Naomi leaned forward. "And that's okay. You don't have to be perfect all the time. The crew trusts you because you're strong, but today proved that strength isn't about never slipping. It's about knowing when to let others help." Her words hit deep. Darren looked at her, realizing how right she was. "Thank you," he said quietly, "not just for helping, but for saying that." Naomi smiled warmly. "Hey, kindness doesn't stop when the plane lands." As they stood to leave, Naomi reached for her wallet to pay, but Darren quickly stopped her. No way, this one S on me. She raised an eyebrow. I was joking about a coffee, you know. I was on. He replied with a grin. You saved my apartment. I can at least handle the bill. Naomi laughed and let him, but as they stepped outside, she did something that caught him off guard. She handed him a small, folded piece of paper. Here, I wrote down your neighbor's contact. He wanted to know you were safe. Said he was worried when the firefighters showed up. Darren took it, a bit stunned. You even followed up with him. She shrugged casually. I wanted to make sure everything was fine. That's what community's about, right? For a moment, Darren couldn't speak. No one had gone that far for him in a long time. Naomi, he said softly, you didn't have to do all that. She smiled. Maybe not, but it's nice to remind people that someone's looking out for them, even when they don't ask. He nodded, feeling something shift inside him. That night, when he returned to his hotel, he stared at that little folded paper on his desk. It wasn't just a number, it was a reminder that kindness could reach across oceans, through radio calls, and between people who might never have spoken outside of work. In the days that followed, Darren and Naomi continued flying together on several routes. The rhythm of their work changed subtly, smoother, warmer. Passengers began noticing the lightness in their interactions, the way Naomi's laughter softened the cabin, the way Darren seemed more open, more human. During one particularly rough flight, when a passenger panicked during turbulence, Darren came out of the cockpit mid-air, something he rarely did, and knelt beside the frightened woman. He said, "You're safe, I promise. I've been through worse storms than this one." His tone was steady, but there was compassion in his eyes, a kind of empathy Naomi hadn't seen from him before. After the flight, she told him, "You're different now." He smiled. "Maybe I finally understand what kindness really looks like." What would you do if you discovered someone quietly carrying that much responsibility, someone strong on the outside, but struggling underneath? Would you reach out and help, even if it wasn't your job? Let me know your thoughts below. I read every comment, and I love hearing your stories of kindness and connection. The terminal lights flickered against the polished floors as crew members gathered for their morning briefing. Darren walked in, uniform crisp as ever, but this time, there was a quiet calm about him. He no longer looked like the man who nearly froze mid-air. Naomi noticed the difference immediately. "Morning, Captain," she said, smiling as she handed him his flight notes. "Morning, Naomi. London again." "Yep, you know, at this point, I think we could fly that route blindfolded." He chuckled. "Let's not test the theory." They both laughed, the easy, familiar kind of laughter that comes from trust. But behind Darren's smile, something else lingered, gratitude. Every flight since that day had reminded him how much Naomi's actions meant. Yet, as with most things in life, peace doesn't last forever. That morning, just before takeoff, Darren received an unexpected call from airline management. He stepped aside, listening as the operations manager's tone grew serious. "Captain Cole, there's been a report filed regarding the in-flight incident 2 weeks ago, the one involving the gas leak situation." Darren frowned. "A report? From who?" "Anonymous. It suggests you were distracted during flight operations due to personal emergency. The airline is obligated to investigate." His heart sank. He knew what that meant. Any suggestion of compromised focus, even briefly, could threaten his license. When he hung up, Naomi saw the color drain from his face. "Captain, what happened?" He sighed. "Someone reported me. Said I was unfit to fly that day." Naomi's eyes widened. "What? You handled that flight perfectly. You were fine once the situation was under control." "Doesn't matter," Darren said quietly. "Regulations don't care about emotions. If they decide I lost focus, even for a moment, that's grounds for disciplinary action." Over the next few days, Naomi couldn't stop thinking about it. She knew how much flying meant to Darren. It wasn't just a job, it was his identity. Losing that would break him. One night, during a layover in Paris, she found him sitting alone on the hotel rooftop terrace, staring out at the city lights. She approached softly, still thinking about the report. He nodded. "They've scheduled a review hearing next week. I could lose my wings, Naomi, over one stupid mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," she said firmly. "You did what any human would have done." He gave a hollow laugh. "Pilots aren't allowed to be human, remember? We're supposed to be unshakable, perfect." Naomi sat beside him. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the world doesn't need perfect pilots, it needs compassionate ones. People who remember what it feels like to care." Her words hung in the air, soft but powerful. Darren looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, all the noise in his head went quiet. Then, he said something he hadn't admitted to anyone before. "I used to think kindness made you weak. that letting people in meant losing focus. But now, I think it's the only thing keeping me grounded. Naomi smiled faintly. Then hold on to that. Don't let fear take it away. A few days later, the tension between duty and friendship came to a head. The airline's internal investigation team contacted Naomi for an interview. She thought it was routine, until she heard the questions. Did Captain Cole exhibit signs of stress or distraction during the flight? Would you say his emotional state affected crew operations? Naomi hesitated. He was momentarily distracted, yes, but he regained control quickly. The flight was safe. The investigator scribbled notes. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. That'll be all. When Naomi left the room, a sinking feeling twisted in her stomach. She hadn't meant to make him look bad, she was just being honest. But later that evening, she got a message from Darren. Heard you gave your statement today. She replied, yeah, I just told them the truth, that you were distracted for a minute, but the flight was never in danger. He says I see. Thanks. Just 2 words, I see. She could feel the distance forming already. The next morning, as they prepared for a domestic flight to Chicago, Darren was distant. No small talk, no shared laughter. He spoke only in clipped, professional sentences. Naomi finally cornered him in the galley before boarding. Captain, talk to me. What's going on? He didn't look up from his checklist. Nothing to talk about. Yes, there is, she insisted. If you're upset about the interview, I didn't mean. He cut her off. You didn't mean to tell them I lost focus? That I panicked in front of my crew? Naomi's voice softened. Darren, I told the truth. You were scared, and that's okay. You're human. He finally looked at her, frustration in his eyes. Not in this job, Naomi. Humanity gets you grounded. For the first time, Naomi didn't know what to say. The man she had saved, the one who'd opened up to her, now looked at her like she was part of the problem. The tension lingered off flight. Even the passengers noticed how quiet the usually cheerful crew was. That night, Naomi sat alone in her hotel room, scrolling through her messages. There were none from Darren, just silence. She sighed and whispered to herself, maybe I crossed a line. Meanwhile, across the hall, Darren sat staring at his pilot's logbook. His hands hovered over the pen, but he couldn't write. He kept replaying Naomi's words in his head. You don't have to be perfect all the time. Maybe she was right. Maybe he'd been so obsessed with control that he forgot what connection looked like. But still, being vulnerable had consequences, and now he might lose everything because of it. The day of the review hearing finally arrived. Darren walked into the meeting room wearing his uniform, shoulders squared but heart pounding. The panel of 3 airline officials sat across the table. One of them began reading from the report. Captain Cole demonstrated temporary emotional distress during Flight 221 due to personal emergency. However, flight operations remained within safety limits. They asked him to explain. He could have minimized it. He could have blamed exhaustion or stress. But instead, Darren took a deep breath and said, I panicked. For about 10 seconds, I wasn't focused on flying, I was focused on the thought that my home could be burning. But that moment reminded me something I'd forgotten. Even pilots are human. What matters isn't whether we feel fear, it's how we respond. My crew responded with professionalism, with compassion, and because of them, that flight stayed safe. There was silence. Then, one of the officials asked, would you say this experience has changed how you approach your work? Darren nodded. Completely. I used to think leadership meant never showing weakness. Now I know it means trusting your team, and letting kindness lead, even in the sky. After the hearing, Darren walked out of the room feeling lighter, not because he knew the outcome, but because he'd finally stopped hiding behind perfection. That evening, he found Naomi in the crew lounge, sipping tea. She looked up nervously. How did it go? She asked. He smiled, a soft, genuine smile. They cleared me. No suspension, just a note in my file and a recommendation for leadership training. Naomi exhaled in relief. That's great news. Darren nodded. Yeah, and I owe you an apology. She blinked. For what? For doubting you. For forgetting that honesty is also an act of kindness. Naomi smiled, eyes glistening. We're good, Captain. Always have been. He chuckled. You know, I think I'm finally starting to understand what being a good captain really means. The crew room buzzed with the usual early morning chatter, laughter, coffee machines humming, and the rustle of uniforms being adjusted. But this time, there was something different in the air. On the wall-mounted TV, a feature from Aviation Today played a segment titled The Human Side of the Skies, How Compassion Saved Flight 221. Naomi froze mid-sip when she saw Darren's face appear on screen. He was being interviewed, wearing his captain's uniform with his signature calm smile. "That day taught me something," he said in the interview. "Flying isn't just about skill, it's about trust. I learned that true strength isn't about never panicking, it's about how you handle it, and who you allow to help you through." The segment showed a brief clip of the cabin crew, Naomi among them, laughing during pre-flight prep. Then, Darren added, "Naomi, my head flight attendant, acted faster and with more compassion than anyone could have asked for. She reminded me that leadership is not about hierarchy, it's about humanity." Naomi's eyes softened. She didn't even realize she was smiling until another crew member nudged her playfully. "Looks like you're famous now," they said. She laughed. "I didn't do it for fame. I just did what anyone would do." But deep down, she knew not everyone would have done what she did, and seeing Darren acknowledge it, publicly, humbly, touched her in a way she couldn't quite explain. Darren waited by the briefing table as his new team gathered. Naomi walked in last. He turned, smiling warmly. "Naomi, thought I'd lost my favorite co-pilot in kindness." She grinned. "I thought you'd be too famous for us now." He chuckled. "You know fame's not my thing, but changing how we work, that's something I can get behind." She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward a folder on the table. Inside were documents with a header: Crew Wellness Initiative Proposal. "I'm starting a new program," Darren explained. "Workshops for crew mental health, how to handle stress, panic, burnout." I pitched it to management. They said if I can get senior flight attendants involved, it's a go. Naomi flipped through the pages, impressed. "You're serious about this?" "More than ever," he said. "You taught me that being human isn't a weakness, it's our greatest strength. I want other pilots to know that too." Naomi looked at him, this time, not as her superior, but as someone transformed. "Count me in," she said. What began as a simple proposal quickly turned into something much bigger. Over the following weeks, Darren and Naomi worked side by side, planning, presenting, and speaking to other crews about the importance of compassion and teamwork. The first workshop was awkward at first. Pilots and attendants weren't used to talking about feelings or personal struggles, but Darren broke the ice with his story. "I once thought showing emotion made me unfit to lead," he told the group. "Then one day, I froze, and my crew carried me. That moment didn't make me weak, it made me grateful." The room went silent. Then one by one, others began sharing their own experiences: panic attacks mid-flight, family emergencies they couldn't address, moments when kindness saved the day. Naomi facilitated, listening, encouraging, connecting people. Together, they built something real, a bridge between professionalism and humanity. One evening after a long day of training, Darren and Naomi sat in an empty gate area, watching planes taxi under the twilight sky. Darren leaned back, his tone reflective. "You know, for years, I defined myself by control. I thought if I ever slipped, I'd lose everything. But now I realize, the only thing I lost was connection." Naomi smiled softly. "You found it again though." He nodded. "Thanks to you." She tilted her head. "I didn't do it alone. You chose to listen. You chose to change." He looked at her, eyes thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been on that flight?" She chuckled lightly. "You'd probably have a new apartment by now." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from surviving something together. But then Darren grew serious. "No, really. That day changed my entire outlook. It reminded me that kindness isn't something we add to our lives, it is life, it's what holds everything together." Naomi nodded. "It's funny, people think kindness is soft, but it's the hardest thing to do consistently." He smiled. "Then I guess we're in the business of doing hard things." Months later, the airline held its annual awards gala, a formal event honoring outstanding crew members. Darren and Naomi were both invited, unaware of what was coming. When the time came, the CEO stepped on stage. "Tonight, we honor two individuals who reminded us that behind every safe flight are hearts that care deeply for others. Their story moved thousands of passengers and inspired a company-wide wellness initiative. Please welcome Captain Darren Cole and Head Flight Attendant Naomi Brooks." The audience erupted in applause. As Darren and Naomi walked onto the stage, he leaned toward her and whispered, "You should be up here alone." She shook her head. "We got here together." When the applause quieted, Darren took the microphone. "A while ago, I thought leadership meant never showing weakness. But that's not true. Real leadership means admitting when you're afraid, and trusting your team enough to catch you when you fall." Naomi didn't just save my home, she saved my perspective, and for that, I'll be forever grateful. The crowd stood, clapping louder than before. Naomi's eyes glistened. When it was her turn to speak, she said simply, "We're all flying through something, Whether it's 36,000 feet above ground or just trying to get through the day, what matters most is that we look out for each other, even when it's not our job. That line, "We're all flying through something," would go on to become the slogan for the airline's kindness campaign. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the hall emptied, Darren and Naomi stood near the stage. He said quietly, "You know, months ago I thought I was the one teaching others how to stay calm in a crisis. Turns out, I was the student all along." Naomi smiled. "And what did you learn, Captain?" He paused. "That kindness doesn't just save lives, it gives them purpose." They shared a quiet, content smile, two people who had faced fear, misunderstanding, and doubt, and turned it into something beautiful. In the months that followed, their stories spread across social media. Pilots and attendants from other airlines started adopting similar programs. Some wrote letters saying Darren's story helped them admit burnout or seek help. Darren often replied personally, "Courage isn't flying through storms, it's reaching out when you can't do it alone." As for Naomi, she was promoted to crew trainer, leading empathy and crisis management sessions worldwide. Whenever she introduced herself, she'd tell the new recruits, "Once, I helped a captain in distress, but the truth is, he helped me believe kindness could still change the world." The sun spilled gently through the cafe window, painting the room in shades of gold. A quiet hum of conversation filled the space as passengers rolled luggage past a glass. At a corner table, Naomi Brooks sat alone, sipping her tea and reading an aviation magazine. The headline read, "When Compassion Takes Flight, How Two Crew Members Changed Airline Culture." She smiled faintly. Her photo, standing beside Captain Darren Cole, both of them mid-laugh, graced the page. Just then, the cafe door opened, and Darren walked in, still in uniform but noticeably more relaxed than the man who once panicked mid-flight. He spotted Naomi instantly. "You still read magazines about yourself?" he teased. She chuckled. "Only the ones where I look good." He sat down opposite her, setting his cap on the table. "How is the new position treating you, Trainer Brooks?" "Busy," she admitted, "but fulfilling. You wouldn't believe how many people open up during those sessions. Turns out, we're all fighting private battles." Darren nodded thoughtfully. "Yet, and now they actually have a safe place to talk about it." "That's all you." Naomi smiled warmly. "That's us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind shared only by people who lived through something life-changing together. Finally, Darren said, "You know, I took a new habit from you." "Oh yeah? What's that?" "Checking the stove before leaving the house." Naomi burst into laughter, the kind that made other people in the cafe turn to look. "That's progress," she said between laughs. He grinned. "Seriously though, Naomi, that day could have ended badly. Instead, it turned into something I'll never forget. You reminded me that the most powerful thing we can do, even at 36,000 feet, is stay human." She looked at him, her eyes soft but proud. "And you reminded me that even the calmest people sometimes need saving. There's strength in admitting that." Hours later, Naomi stood by the terminal window, watching Darren's plane prepare for takeoff. The sunlight hit the aircraft perfectly, gleaming against a blue sky, a symbol of everything they had overcome. As the engines roared to life, Naomi whispered softly, almost to herself, "Fly safe, Captain, and thank you for proving that kindness still matters." The plane lifted off gracefully, disappearing into the clouds. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Who in your life needs a little kindness today? A message, a call, or even a simple smile could change their whole day. Leave a heart in the comments if you believe kindness is power.